Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling something pretty fundamental,
Sure.
something we all do, how we learn and remember things. It's really at the core of everything we do, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, without memory, we wouldn't be able to function in the world. We wouldn't be able to learn new things or build on our past experiences.
Exactly. And, our listeners are always looking for ways to learn better, learn more efficiently, and make that information really stick. And you shared some research that dives into the heart of this, and I think is going to offer some pretty powerful insights for everyone.
Yeah. I think what makes this study so interesting is that it's not just theoretical. It actually put different learning methods to the test to see what really works, what makes a difference in how well people remember things.
Okay, so set the stage for us. What was the experiment all about?
All right, so picture this. You've got 228 participants. That's our starting point.
That's a decent sample size, right?
Yeah, it gives the researchers a good amount of data to work with. And they randomly split these participants into 3 groups. Now, here's the catch. Each group gets the exact same set of items to memorize.
Okay, so we're controlling for the information itself. Makes sense.
Exactly. We want to isolate the effect of the presentation, the way the information is delivered. So one group, they just get a plain old list of words. Simple, straightforward.
Straightforward, but maybe not the most exciting way to learn, right?
Probably not. Another group, they see an image that visually represents all those same items from the list. So everything's there, but it's, in a visual format.
So we've got words and pictures, classic learning tools. What's the third group get?
The third group, this is where it gets interesting, they get a narrative, a short story that skillfully weaves in all of those items from the list. Same information, but presented within a connected storyline.
Okay, so we've got a list, an image, and a story.
Right.
3 very different approaches to learning the same material. What happens next?
So immediately after encountering the material in their assigned format, everybody takes a memory test. It's what's called a free recall test. Basically, just write down everything you can remember from what you just saw or read.
No multiple choice, no hints, just pure recall.
Exactly. Then, to see how memory holds up over time, they give everybody the same test again, but after a delay.
So we can see what fades away and what sticks.
Exactly. Now, the really clever part of this study is that they didn't stop there. They wanted to understand the why behind the results. So they also measured how immersed the participants felt in each learning format. Did they feel drawn in? Did they feel present with the material?
Okay, interesting. So it's not just about what they remember, but also about their subjective experience during the learning process.
Exactly. And they also measured something called extraneous cognitive load. Think of it as the amount of extra mental effort it takes to process the information. Is it mentally taxing? Or does it flow smoothly?
Makes sense. Too much mental strain could actually hinder learning, right?
Absolutely. And finally, they measured how much each format triggered mental imagery. Did it make people spontaneously create pictures in their minds related to the information?
That's a great way to get at how the information is being processed, isn't it? Okay, so let's get to the good stuff. What did they find?
Well, first off, the results were actually pretty clear-cut. The narrative group, the folks who got the story, they reported feeling significantly more immersed in the material than the list or the image groups.
So the story really pulled them in. No surprise there, right? I mean, we all love a good story.
Yeah, we're hardwired for stories.
Mhm.
And this study really shows that in action. And then the second big finding, the narrative was far more effective at evoking those mental images. People reading the story naturally started picturing things in their heads.
Whereas the list and the image, maybe not so much.
Yeah, it seems like the story acted as a sort of catalyst for the imagination. It just sparked those visuals. And here's the big, potentially eye-opening aha moment for your listeners.
Hit me with it.
Even though everyone showed some memory decline over time, that's natural, the group that learned through the narrative, they experienced significantly less forgetting compared to the other 2 groups.
So the story helped them retain the information better over the long haul. Fascinating. Why do you think that is? What's going on in the brain that makes narrative such a powerful tool for memory?
Well, the study points to the strong connection between those immersive narratives and how our brains naturally generate mental images. Think about it. When you're engrossed in a story, your mind almost automatically starts constructing a mental movie of what's happening. It's like you're simulating the experience, building a sort of virtual reality in your head.
Virtual reality in your head. I love that phrase. It really captures the idea of how active our minds are when we're engaged with a narrative.
Yeah, it really does. And this mental imagery, this internal visualization, appears to be a key ingredient for long-term memory. When you have these mental images, the information becomes less abstract. It's anchored to a context. It has a place in your mind, even if that place is imagined.
Right, it's not just a floating fact anymore. It's
Yeah.
part of a larger mental landscape.
Exactly. And think about it. Have you ever had a really vivid dream? The kind that feels so real. You might remember details from that dream days later, even weeks later, because of how strongly you experienced it in your mind.
I'm sure many of our listeners can relate to that.
Yeah.
And you're saying that narrative taps into a similar process.
Exactly. And it's all about those mental images, making it feel real. Now, contrast that with trying to remember a random list of words or even a static image. It's like you're trying to build that mental landscape from scratch. It takes a lot more effort, and the result is often less stable, less memorable.
So the story provides a framework. It does the heavy lifting for you, cognitively speaking.
It really does. When you encounter a list of facts, you might try to come up with your own way to connect them, to create artificial links. But that requires a lot of conscious effort. A narrative, on the other hand, does the connecting for you naturally, effortlessly. It triggers that mental image making process almost automatically, making it much easier to create those lasting memory traces.
And I think that's a really important takeaway for our listeners. So often we focus on just getting the information in, cramming it into our heads. But this study suggests that the format, the way we encounter the information, can make a world of difference.
Absolutely. So if you're trying to learn something new, anything really, think about how you can turn it into a story. How can you weave it into a narrative, even if it seems like dry, factual material?
So give us some concrete examples. How can someone actually do this? How do you turn, say, a bunch of historical dates into a story?
Let's say you're trying to remember the key events leading up to, I don't know, the French Revolution. Instead of just trying to memorize the dates and the names of the key players, try to imagine it as a story unfolding over time. Think about cause and effect, characters facing challenges, turning points. Imagine the key figures, visualize the settings, picture the narrative arc of what happened. You're essentially creating a historical novel in your mind based on real events.
I love that. So instead of just memorizing the French Revolution started in 1789, it becomes a story about, the social and political tensions leading up to that point. The storming of the Bastille is a pivotal moment. All of a sudden, it's not just a date. It's a story with characters and drama.
Exactly. And all that makes it so much more memorable. Or let's say you're trying to understand a complex scientific process. You could try personifying the different elements involved. Give them roles, give them interactions within a story. Think of it like microscopic drama unfolding.
So creative. I'm already starting to think differently about how I approach learning. It's really about bringing the information to life.
It is. Or, if you're learning a new language, try creating little stories using the new vocabulary and grammar you're trying to master. Or if you're at a conference and meeting new people, try to link their names to a little story or a visual detail about your interaction. The more you can weave information into a narrative, the more likely you are to trigger those spontaneous mental images that are so crucial for memory.
It all comes back to that idea of the immersive narrative acting as a catalyst for your brain to create those memory-enhancing mental images.
It really does. Now, it's also worth mentioning that the researchers looked at some other factors too. Remember that idea of extraneous cognitive load, that mental effort we talked about?
Yeah, that's the stuff that can really get in the way of learning.
Right. So while narrative led to much higher reported immersion, the study didn't find that it increased extraneous cognitive load. In other words, engaging with the narrative wasn't any more mentally taxing than the other formats.
Which is good news, right? It means you're not having to work harder in a way that's actually counterproductive to learning.
Exactly. Sometimes when learning materials are poorly designed, they can create a lot of mental clutter, a lot of noise that distracts from the core information. But this study suggests that well-constructed narratives can be both engaging and image-provoking without being mentally overwhelming. It's like hitting a sweet spot.
And that's really encouraging, I think. It means we don't have to choose between engagement and efficiency. We can have both.
Absolutely. And while this study gave us some really valuable insights, it also opens up a whole bunch of exciting questions for future research. For instance, are some types of narratives more effective than others? Would a more visually descriptive story lead to even better retention? How does the level of immersion impact memory over longer periods? And what about individual differences in people's natural ability to create mental images?
Right, because some people are just naturally more visual thinkers than others.
Exactly. Could training people to enhance their visualization skills further boost the benefits of narrative learning? These are all really intriguing avenues to explore. It makes you wonder about the untapped potential of harnessing our innate storytelling abilities for learning.
It does, and it makes me think about all the ways we can apply these insights, not just in formal education settings, but in everyday life.
Absolutely. So, to wrap things up, what's the core message from this deep dive into the virtual reality in your head?
Well, for me, the key takeaway is just how powerful narrative is as a tool for learning. And often we overlook that power. We get so caught up in the facts and figures that we forget about the importance of story.
I completely agree. And by presenting information in a story format, we can significantly increase how immersed we feel, how engaged we are, spark vivid mental imagery, and ultimately make that information more memorable and lasting.
And for you, our listener, this means you have a really powerful tool at your disposal. You don't have to be a novelist to use it. Just by consciously seeking out or creating narratives around the things you want to learn, you can tap into this natural advantage our brains have and make your learning more effective.
Exactly. It's all about working with your brain, not against it. So, as you go about your week, as you encounter new information, challenge yourself to think about how you can frame it as a story. What mental movie can you create around it? And if simply reading or listening to a narrative can build such a strong internal representation that boosts memory, what other ways could you intentionally cultivate your mental imagery skills to enhance your learning in all sorts of contexts? It's a really powerful idea to consider.
And with that, we'll leave you to ponder that very question. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive,
It's been a pleasure.
and we'll see you next time.
See you then.